Troy, I got a question for you. Have
Yeah,
you ever heard of intuitive eating? And if so, would you consider yourself an intuitive eater?
I have not heard of it before you had brought it up, and I don't know if I consider myself one or not.
All right. Mitch, how about you?
I've heard of it. I am very suspicious and skeptical of it. But
Right.
that's just me coming into it because my intuition tells me to get taquitos
Yes.
on the way home on Maverick.
Yes.
That's what I do. That is what I have to fight against my intuition. So we'll see how it goes.
Yeah, I mean, people on the web or on social media, they talk about intuitive eating, how it's such a great thing, but I'm the same way. I just came off of Christmas and my intuition told me to do a whole bunch of things that I don't think is sustainable. Yeah.
Well, that's what I'm wondering. Is it the same thing as impulsive eating? Because I can say if it's impulsive eating, that seems like a bad idea.
Yeah. All right. So this is Who Cares About Men's Health? Information, inspiration, and a different interpretation of men's health. And maybe you've heard of intuitive eating. We're going to find out what it is. Is it a legit way to eat? Will it help you lose weight? Or is it a recipe for turning one Troy into two Troys weight-wise? I'm Scott.
Troy.
Yes, I'm Scott. I bring the BS. The MD to my BS, Dr. Troy Madsen.
Hey, Scott. Good to be here and excited to figure out how I can have a second Troy here.
He's a Who Cares About Men's Health convert, producer Mitch.
Hey there.
And our guide for intuitive eating today, Thunder Jalili, who is professor of nutrition and integrative physiology in the College of Health at University of Utah. Thunder, are you an intuitive eater? Would you consider yourself such?
That's a great question. I would say in some ways, yes, but probably not by the strict definition of intuitive eating.
Okay. And I think that's probably the first starting point. What is intuitive eating? How is this concept defined when you hear people talking about it?
Yeah. So intuitive eating is not necessarily it's not a diet plan or a strict menu of foods to eat. It's rather a pattern of eating that basically is designed to promote a healthy attitude towards food and a healthy attitude towards body image and health. The idea is that you're not really restricted to a specific diet, that you don't have a list of foods you can eat and foods you have to avoid. It's more, just kind of don't think food is evil, have a good relationship with it, kind of eat what you want and just keep some, health in mind. Eat when you're hungry, don't eat when you're not hungry. Stop when you're full, don't overeat just because the food tastes good. So that's kind of the foundation of intuitive eating. And it's not new. It's been around for probably 25 years, if not more.
See, this sounds, as I hear you saying this, just the basic description sounds more like the college student diet. It's like seriously though, it's kind of like eat when you're hungry, eat whatever you want, but don't, it's not like you have structured meals. When I think of that, I think of college. It's just hey, just eat what you can. It's not like you have a lot of money to go buy a bunch of food anyway. So just kind of find food wherever you can, go to whatever, meeting you can find that has free pizza and eat it. And that's how you get by.
Maybe not exactly like that. Cause they still, intuitive eating, you can have meals, set meals and you can be social with your eating and you can enjoy and find satisfaction. I feel like college was a little bit more kind of scrounging in the alley for whatever you can find. This isn't exactly that, but
okay.
I think the biggest thing with it, or at least the way I see it, is that some people really get hung up with food from a behavioral and from a body image standpoint. And the idea of intuitive eating is that, food is not your enemy. Food is not your crutch or your feel-good thing. Food is food. So I think that's a big part of it. So people that may have potentially issues with disordered eating or using food as a coping mechanism, for stress or other things in life, intuitive eating would tell them, no, food is food. This is not what it's used for. So that's a big part of it.
Okay. Hey, so that was going to be kind of the next question. Who should consider intuitive eating? When you hear it mentioned on social media, a lot of times I don't really hear it mentioned who would benefit from it, who wouldn't benefit from it. It sounds like somebody who has potential eating disorders or a bad relationship with food might want to consider. Are there other people that should consider it?
I think what you said was right in line. I think people who tend to obsess about food and obsess about, what they can eat and what they can't eat. And I guess let me back up for a second. I guess we all have a little bit of obsession about that, right? Like we don't want to eat an entire chocolate cake because we know it's bad, but we'd like to have a slice.
Or we'd like to eat an entire chocolate cake, even though we know that it's bad. I mean,
right, but we know that it's bad, right? So okay, so maybe you would have that cake or that dessert in moderation. Like maybe you'd have it, like it's Christmas. Someone made a great cake or a pie, and okay, I'm going to have it. But if it's like a random Tuesday, maybe you're not going to have that cake or pie. You're not going to go looking for it. You know. Some people, though, if it's Christmas, they won't even have that slice of cake or pie, right? Because it's like a banned food. It's a food that, they shouldn't be eating because they're watching their sugar. And so intuitive eating would tell you, don't worry about it. It's a special occasion. Go ahead and have it. Right. So I think people that are too kind of tied into what they eat as like a way to, maintain their weight and a way to maybe cope with their emotions and, maybe just a way to find some self-worth. I mean, they can benefit from it. Because this is disconnecting the idea of eating and who you are as a person.
Thunder, I was wondering, you mentioned that it kind of was, you keep using these terms like the feelings of food, this kind of like relationship with food. What are some of like the negative things that can happen with people that have a negative relationship with food? Because I mean, it's not always just the go-to when you think of like eating disorders. I've also heard of things like, was it orthorexia, where people are super strict or regulated, etc. What are some of the potential nutritional problems that people can face?
Yeah. I think actually people who have tendencies to orthorexia, they could probably benefit from some elements of intuitive eating. So whenever food is used like as a coping mechanism or like a self-medication or something, some of the negative things that can happen kind of on both sides of the spectrum. One is you can like not eat much food because there's so many problems with this type of food or that type of food. So maybe you can get into, problems with malnutrition. Maybe you can go down an eating disorder road. The other side of it is, food is used as a coping mechanism to help you deal with problems or feel better. Then, possibly you can get into binge eating scenarios, right? So there's kind of issues on both ends of the spectrum. So they're really, I think in general, I mean, intuitive eating aside, I think in general, everyone can benefit from taking a step back and just recognizing food as a tool we have for, health, nutrition, disease prevention, but it's, it's the fuel to make us go. It's not, much more beyond that. If there's issues that one would have, then, maybe they need to deal with them through a different mechanism and not food, maybe through, counseling or therapy or anything along those lines.
I guess, so what I'm getting from this conversation is I thought, intuitive eating was this innate ability of our bodies to know what kind of food we need to eat or would want to eat, which I don't know that that's necessarily what you're saying, because traditionally like high carbohydrate and high fat foods would be what we intuitively would have craved at one point. But it sounds like it's more of a relationship with food, not looking at food as good or bad. And maybe the part that you're tapping into, the natural thing is asking yourself the question before you eat, am I hungry now? Or am I consuming this food for a different reason? Because I can certainly tell you that at night, I'll be like in the fridge thinking I want something. And I pause and I'll ask myself, well, I'm not even hungry. What am I doing? So like I'm like combating boredom, or I don't know, trying to console myself because there's nothing good on TV. I don't know what's going on. So, that kind of sounds maybe more of what intuitive eating is like.
Yes. And you actually hit on one of there's like, different rules of intuitive eating, or not rules, like guidelines. And one of them is honor your feelings without using food. So what you just described, Scott, is like right on with that. Why are you looking for that snack? It's has nothing to do with food. It's for another reason.
And there are times like when I'm working on something that's really hard during the workday that's taking a lot of brain power, and my brain is like rebelling. It doesn't want to think anymore. So I find myself almost like a zombie getting up, going downstairs to the fridge, looking for something to nosh on. I think it's just an excuse to do something else. Right. And for some reason I go to food as opposed to other things. So,
yeah.
It sounds like, too, Thunder, as you're talking about this, like initially as I was hearing about it, I thought, well, it just kind of sounds like it's this free for all thing where you just kind of say, hey, I'm just going to eat what I want to eat when I want to eat. But it sounds like there is some structure to it as well, where I guess kind of some parameters where you basically have to at least have some thought process behind why you're eating and asking yourself, am I eating to fill an emotional need, or am I eating because I'm hungry? Is that part of it you're seeing as well?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's really the bottom line. You eat to fill a physiological need, one, and there is a little bit of emotional kind of social part of it too, because you're allowed to enjoy what you eat. You're allowed to find satisfaction in what you eat, not feel guilty because, oh, I had pasta. That's so bad, So that's part of intuitive eating. And there's another part that we actually haven't really touched on. Exercise is like part of the whole guidelines of intuitive eating, that you have to make sure to move, to do things, to find, exercise, because that's part of this whole package of guidelines.
Yeah. And it seems like, just also hearing about it, that seems like probably an essential element. Like I can see this really working well for people who are very active and, burning a lot of calories, and they really don't have to give a lot of thought to what they eat. Is that kind of what you're seeing in terms of people who are successful with this? Or are you seeing like kind of, standard office workers who are lucky to get 30 minutes of exercise 3 times a week who are also having success with this? Like, I guess, who is this really working for?
Honestly, I'm not really sure, because I don't have a lot of personal experience with it, with people who follow this and, what their long-term, prognosis is. So I don't know. But I know just in general, people who are too amped up about food could benefit from listening to some of these guidelines. Now the one hole that I see with it, and like in the beginning, you asked me, do you follow intuitive eating? And I said, kind of.
Yeah.
The reason why I say kind of is because there's a lot of foods I enjoy, but in general, I don't eat like a lot of sugar. I don't eat a lot of desserts and things like that. And there's times when my intuition is like, well, I'd love to have that, but I don't. And I choose something different instead. Now, the alternative I choose is still something I like and something I enjoy, but it's not necessarily that, that cookie or whatever. So if I was like a pure intuitive eater, I wouldn't worry about it. I would just say, yeah, I'm going to have that cookie. So that's why I'm not totally into it. But there's other things I really do, follow those guidelines. Like I like to exercise. I feel food is food. I don't use it as an emotional crutch or those other things we were talking about. So I guess I'm kind of partly there, and maybe a lot of us are partly there.
So one of the things you talked about, and it's come up a few times, is this notion of, am I hungry or am I not hungry? And that is a cornerstone to then deciding, why am I trying to eat? Is this notion, like from personal experience, I can say, there are times I think I'm hungry. Like, oh, I'm hungry, but really I'm not. Like one of those might be, even I've heard that if you're thirsty, it can manifest as hunger. So sometimes I'll drink water, but sometimes, like I said, I'll think I'm hungry because obviously I'm going down to the kitchen to get something. So I must be hungry. Is that something that needs to be recalibrated in some people, or is this just to bring attention to it and you can figure it out sort of thing? How could somebody that's struggling with that, figure out when they're truly hungry or not?
Yeah, that's definitely something to, something that has to be considered is, if you're hungry, respect the hunger, right? Get something to eat, but really ask yourself, am I hungry? And a classic example here is like if you're in a social situation and you go out to eat, like with friends, or you meet friends somewhere and everyone's getting food and you're not really that hungry, but you just kind of get food anyway to go along with it. Maybe intuitive eating would tell you, well, you're not really hungry. Don't get anything. Don't worry about it. And then the other side is at the end, like if you've eaten some food and you're full, kind of respect the fact that you're full and just be done. Even if other people are eating, or even if, you have the option to get more, like in a buffet or whatever, respect when you're full.
And that's a part of this that really does make sense to me too. Just the fact that we so often eat just because, okay, it's lunchtime, it's time to eat, or it's dinner time, or social reasons, or whatever external cues are triggering that, where we're like, okay, I need to eat because it's that time, or because I'm in this situation. But the fact that this really pushes just like, hey, eat when you're hungry and don't eat otherwise, that definitely makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. And stop when you're full, because, right, we've all been there where, we're full, but there's still food available. And we're like, yeah, I'll have more.
I know. Yeah. At some point in my life, I need to get over that 1980s guilt trip of like, you have to eat all your food. Look at these starving children. Like at some point, I need to get beyond that.
Yeah. Right. Troy, remember that for your children.
Exactly.
And also remember, their stomach is like the size of a walnut.
Yeah, exactly.
So, okay. So I got a couple things. I can hear an application of this kind of making sure that you're in tune with your intuition about being hungry or not. In a work scenario, you go in the break room. If there happens to be food in there, sometimes we'll mindlessly just grab, whatever happens to be there, whether it's healthy or not, but it's extra calories, right? So over time, you do that enough times. Now all of a sudden you've eaten more than your body is really telling you need, and you can see the pounds start to come on. So I guess, again, coming into contact, getting into touch with why am I picking this up? Is it because I'm really hungry, or is it for other reasons?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, break rooms are so bad. I was just going to, sorry to jump in. I now work in a setting where there is a break room, and there is always food in there. And it's amazing just how that pattern can develop. So it's like, oh, I've got a break. I'm going to go get some food. Oh, yeah, that sure tasted great. Maybe I'll get another, 30 minutes later, I'll go grab some more.
Time for another break.
And everybody likes free food. And a lot of times the choices aren't necessarily the things we should be eating, but it's there.
It's there. Yeah. And someone brought it, like a patient brought it in. Well, I have to eat it. It was so kind of them to do that. So, it can be, again, talking about all those external cues that really get in the way of, I think that's part of it too. I'm guessing part of the intuitive eating is learning, number one, to recognize what truly is hunger versus what's habit, and or whatever else. That
hunger versus habit. I like that.
Hunger versus habit. Like that's probably part of the intuition, and developing that sort of intuition to recognize hunger and recognize when you're really not hungry and to not eat then.
And allow yourself to eat when you're hungry. Don't like shortchange it. Okay, I'm hungry. I'm only going to have this and that's it. That's not part of intuitive eating. Is eat. You're hungry. Okay, eat something. Don't worry about it. When you're full, you're full. Stop.
Right.
And let's talk about that fullness thing too. So how can I determine when I'm full? I've heard some deal one time that actually you were full before it's sent to your brain that you're full. Is there any truth to that? Like you should stop when you're still a little bit hungry, because 10, 15 minutes later, that's when the brain catches up to the stomach. We're like, hey, we're fine, actually.
Yeah. I've heard people talk about that. The system is definitely linked. I don't know what the lag time is, but if you just eat at a reasonable pace, you will be full and your brain will tell you you're full.
Did you guys, could you guys hear in Thunder's voice? He's like, oh, here's Scott with this what if scenario again.
Well, like we're looking for like these fine, timelines of, to try to define it out. And I don't know. That's like the opposite of intuitive eating, like trying to find these timelines of when am I going to be full? I need to anticipate it. I would just say eat at a moderate pace and just, it's not rocket science. You'll feel when the stomach's getting full.
No, that's probably a good piece of it too, to eat at a moderate pace. And I can say my pace of eating is generally fairly rapid. And I think partly that comes from being the oldest of 6 children, where it was about survival of the fittest. You got to eat fast to get enough food. So, so that's probably part of it also, because I think, like you said, Scott, sometimes maybe we do like it. Yeah. I don't know about the actual relay time from your stomach to your brain, but there's definitely a piece of that where you eat really, really fast and then you're really, really full.
There, from WebMD, as I was doing a little bit of research before this conversation, had another aspect of intuitive eating I want to throw out there because I find this kind of interesting. They say when you eat intuitively, you also get rid of the idea you need to lose or gain weight so you can look a certain way. The idea of intuitive eating is to focus on foods that work best for your overall physical and mental health. And I like this because over the course of our podcast, we have come to realize that men tend to think about diet and exercise as a way to look a certain way physically. Yeah. And then we discount the fact that, you know what, I could eat in a certain way. I can focus on foods that make me feel good, that I enjoy, because let me tell you, too much sugar does not make me feel good, right? It's good at the time, but
Feels great at the time.
yeah, but afterwards, I feel sometimes, some people develop gastrointestinal things. It might upset their stomach. Some people, the sugar causes people to be anxious, or whatever it does. So I like this idea of just thinking about foods that work best for you and not thinking about what foods are going to help me lose weight or what foods are going to help me bulk up, right? What foods work best for me? What do you guys think of that thought?
Oh, I love it. Yeah. And I think maybe that's part of that intuition as well. Just, hey, I eat this because I feel good after I eat it. I don't feel weighed down. I don't feel like that sugar high and then it just crashes. I just feel good. And I feel, certainly that mental health component of it. So I like that. And again, I think that's part of the intuition you probably need to develop if you're doing this, is recognizing the foods that do make you feel good and remembering to stick to those foods.
I really jived with this idea that with intuitive eating, to change up this idea that certain foods are good, certain foods are bad, eat when you're hungry, etc. Because as someone who has, always kind of struggled with my weight in one way or another, there were times, when you're trying to lose some weight, start of the year type stuff, whatever, that it didn't matter that I was hungry. It's like, no, if I eat, I'm going to gain weight. I got to keep, I will continue to be hungry until it is time for food. And so this idea of factoring in also your mental health and how you're feeling and, how the food makes you feel in both mentally and physiologically, I really appreciate that.
Yeah. And it's, it can be very liberating, I think, for people who don't come from that space and now discover this pattern of eating. I think it's very liberating.
Speaking of liberating, we just came off the holidays. So I'm curious, in terms of this discussion we're having about, intuitive eating, how do you think you did over the holidays? Were you being truly intuitive with the food choices you made? Troy, how about you?
I have no idea. I can't say I all out binged, but I will say I got a pack of Oreos. Family size. It did not last very long.
Yeah.
Broke it with Oreos?
What's that?
You broke your fast with Oreos?
I love Oreos.
Oreos are delicious
out there.
I
Thunder is offended. He is
I'm
offended.
Sorry to offend you, Thunder.
Offended. Your sugar allocation, you blew it on the worst possible choice.
If I were to blow my sugar allocation on anything, it would be on Oreos. And I just blew it out of the water. I ate so many Oreos. They were so good.
All right. Well, now I know what your kryptonite is.
It is my kryptonite. Oreos are my kryptonite, without question.
Wow. I'll tell you the downside of, I think, binging over the holidays, which I think I tend to do a little bit, is it's hard coming off that. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I'm better if I just don't have it at all. I'm going to spend the next couple weeks going through withdrawals where it's going to be really hard, I think.
Getting the shakes.
I haven't had that so much, though. It just felt like a good vacation. To me, it kind of just felt like a good vacation. It was kind of like, that was fun. I enjoyed it. That was really good. But
now
I'm back on track. Yeah. So, and that's kind of where I am right now. So I kind of enjoyed it, I got to say.
You guys would know like how much intuitive eating you do without realizing it. If you think back to the holidays, can you remember all the different sweets and things that you had, or can't really remember the specific ones? You just remember you had some.
Oh, I can remember the specific ones. Oh, yeah.
I could give you a list, Thunder.
Yeah,
you guys are not intuitive.
I could give you a list. Yeah.
Yeah, you're not intuitive if you can make a list, because intuitive people would be like, I had some, but I don't, it was part of it. I don't remember exactly what. That's more the intuitive mindset.
How is that? And how is that more intuitive? I don't understand that.
Because you're not like, you don't have like this list of acceptable and banned food. So when you get the banned ones, it's seared into your brain,
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. All right. I don't know if it's intuitive eating or not, but like for me, my weakness are these caramels, these dark chocolate caramels that come in these tubs of all things. That's great.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, they're tubs. And then also pie. I love apple pie or like a fruit pie around the holidays. And I will say I was proud of myself, and this probably is not intuitive eating. I did ration that. Like normally it's just pie all the time, like breakfast pie, sure, dinner pie, yeah, lunchtime pie, you bet.
Pie.
This year
that
it was
snack
just
pie?
yeah. I just had pie. I think I'm going to celebrate by having dessert pie.
Pie, yeah.
Nice.
This year I did kind of, and maybe this is intuitive because I came to realize I don't feel good when I do that, right? So I limited it to once a day pie. So I don't know. If
That's
or
intuitive.
not.
Like
Is
an
that-
entire pie, or just a
No,
piece?
no, just a slice.
Just a once a day
Reasonable.
pie.
I get the other part of this is how big was the slice?
Yeah.
It was very reasonable, I thought. It was
like,
a
here's a
reasonably
pie.
sized slice, yeah.
Half for you, half for me. You know?
Yeah, no, it wasn't that at all. So
Now, it is interesting. During over the holidays, Jonathan's family is very much like a eat all day until you want to die type of like family, and I'm not. I don't come from that. And this year, I did like kind of speak up where it was just like, no, I'm not going to have a second helping of whatever because I am stuffed. I am full. I can't do any more. And it was just this kind of weird. I felt better. I wasn't miserable that next day. So it's just like, yeah.
Well, it's funny too. Like, as you said that, Mitch, like I'm stuffed, I'm full. Like we feel obligated to say I am stuffed and I am full.
Yes. Like, please, no more.
Like in Spanish, they use the term satisfied. Like I'm satisfied. And that's the question. Are you satisfied? Estás satisfecho? And yeah, estoy satisfecho. Like I'm satisfied. It's that simple. Where I think it's part of our culture too, where it's like, I got to be stuffed and like ready to vomit before I can stop eating.
Yeah, I really like that satisfied thing.
Yeah.
That's a great way of looking at it. And sometimes it doesn't matter, like say you have your transgressions, this and that. If you just don't eat a lot, you can still be full. And then it doesn't matter what you ate, you feel okay. It's only that getting stuffed, even if it's with really good foods, overeating still makes you feel like crap.
Well, this has been a great conversation because intuitive eating, it was not so intuitive. It turned out to be something that I did not suspect at all. I think we should summarize the big bullet points here as we wrap this up. I think intuitive eating is asking yourself the question, am I eating because I'm hungry or I'm eating for some other reason? If it's for some other reason, then perhaps you might want to reconsider food as the thing you're going to do and maybe address those other things. What were some of the other big takeaways for you guys?
I would say if you're hungry, then go ahead and eat. Don't feel guilty. And when you're full, be sensitive. Stop.
Okay, that's good. And in Mitch's situation that he even talked about, like, in between meals, if you feel hungry, have a little snack that makes you feel good. Because I think in the long run, that can prevent you from making poor choices later on down the road as well, right? When you're in this state of starvation.
Yeah. And you just go crazy.
And I found that I like a lot. I do little snacks now, and I do like an apple or a little bit of hummus or something like that. And just how much better I feel feeding myself when I'm hungry.
Stuff you enjoy, but yet, feeding yourself when you're hungry, you feel better too. Were there other big high points that we want? Intuitive eating is not just eating whatever you want.
Right.
I think intuitive eating is not assigning good or bad to foods, because I think we can get into, I know I've gotten into situations where then eating's just not fun anymore, right? So having some, I don't know, over the holidays we had some sourdough bread, and you tend to think bread's not a good food, right? Well, in moderation with a lot of other healthy choices, it's fine. Yeah. Right. And it adds a little bit of enjoyment back. So quit labeling good or bad. Other big takeaways.
I would say the part about not using food as a coping mechanism or a way to, deal with your feelings or things like that. Just, food is food. Find other ways to deal with anything that happens to be bothering you at the time, whether it's
or as a distraction. I like to use it as a distraction.
Yeah. And I really like that concept too of just saying, how do I feel after I eat this? Not necessarily while I'm eating it, because there's plenty of foods it feels great while I'm eating it. But yeah, how do I feel 30 minutes later? And then remembering that, and just remembering, hey, these are the foods that I feel good after I eat them. And not like I feel good about myself, but just my body feels good. And then trying to stick to those things.
Yeah. Right. So it requires a little bit of paying attention and effort, I guess, to start being intuitive.
Right. Yeah. There's some mindfulness stuff going on here. You have to start asking yourself some questions about all sorts of assumed things that you've done or behaviors that you engage in that you don't think about. So,
yeah.
Well, Thunder, thanks for defining this. I'm curious for our listeners. Here's your challenge. Start listening to your intuition when it comes to eating. Maybe pick one of those major points that we brought out there and ask yourself the question, how am I doing on this? Or is there a way I can implement this into my life that will make my life better, make me feel better, perhaps, whatever. And we would love to hear your thoughts. Did we cover it pretty well? If you happen to be an intuitive eating expert, there's such a thing. I'm sure there is. You can reach out to us. hello@thescoperadio.com. That's hello@thescoperadio.com. Thanks for listening, and thanks for caring about men's health.